God is to reality what zero is to math is an analogy that can help define and describe God. It is so different from what people expect that it can be easily misunderstood. So let's clarify its meaning by defining key words within it. God and zero may seem unrelated because God is supreme and zero is just a placeholder. That is why we use an analogy instead of direct comparison. God isn't zero, and zero isn't God. An analogy compares two different things based on a specific similarity. We use what we understand to explain what is harder to grasp. Since the analogy helps define God, we will replace the word with an X for now. This should help avoid triggering any unnecessary defensiveness. We're saying that there is something in reality that functions like zero in math. Please don't misinterpret that as X is to reality what zero is to reality. Zero in reality is emptiness or a lack. But math isn't reality itself. It is a system we use to describe reality as objectively and accurately as possible. Just because we invented mathematical sounds and symbols doesn't mean we invented the rules and values they represent. Math is only valid if it describes something real. Now, of course, there is some advanced or improving math that may not apply to reality. We won't be dealing with any of that. We will stick to the basics. If you understand algebra, this won't be too advanced. Anything learned later, such as trigonometry and calculus, will not be needed at this time. This is not about who knows more math. Reality is what it is, whether we observe it or not. Its properties don't change based on how we measure or understand them. Math objectively describes quantity and patterns in reality. Numbers themselves act as a shorthand for adjectives answering the question how many or how much. They're not real, but they matter because what they describe is real. Unlike words, which we define by agreement, numbers are defined by their relation to zero. In order to have a first of anything, there must have previously been none, no exceptions. Numbers are consistent because they are based on something constant, unchanging, and beyond finite definition. Zero. Because it was discovered long after numbers weren't in use, people may try to argue we don't actually need it. History is like our personal learning experience. We learn about numbers through example and are able to perform basic arithmetic without concern for zero as an absolute value. But upon its discovery, we find we have been using it all along without even realizing it. Whenever you clear space to start counting, that empty space represents zero. The unmarked edge of a ruler is zero. Sliding all the pegs of an abacus to one side signifies zero. And closing your fist before counting with your fingers is zero as well. Zero isn't an invention, it is the unavoidable starting point for measurement. We do not impose zero onto systems, we recognize its necessity within them. Even though zero is the reference point for defining all numbers, many assume zero has no actual connection to reality. Since zero has no finite attributes, it is impossible to provide tangible proof for it. Demanding physical evidence for zero is unreasonable. What would be even more unreasonable is to assume that our most subjective way of describing reality has a fictional foundation. Even if zero were just a mathematical invention, it wouldn't be needed unless it described something real. We rely on sensory perception and imagination to learn, so when a subject makes them useless, it is tempting to believe there can be no proof either way. The purpose of logic is to determine what must be true according to what we know, even beyond what we can perceive. Measurement begins with none, so the logical conclusion is anything measurable must actually begin somewhere. Since it is impossible to act before existence, the measurable must have an origin that is immeasurable. Confusing potential infinity with something that has no beginning or end, and misapplying the law of conservation of matter and energy lead many to resist this undeniable truth. Potential infinity seems limitless because we cannot measure its boundaries. From our perspective, certain things can go on forever, such as space and time. We need them to exist, so it is impossible to have a vantage point to even contemplate or imagine a reality without their presence or existence. It is illogical to impose those cognitive limits on reality itself. The law of conservation states that neither matter nor energy can create or destroy themselves or each other, yet some mistakenly use it to claim they are eternal. Because our existence depends on matter and energy, it is easy to overlook the contradiction and assume immeasurable things have no beginning. The law of conservation should be evidence that matter and energy need an origin that is neither material nor active. It is impossible for something to be both infinite and finite. The infinite cannot be defined in finite terms. So, regardless of any expert opinion or intellectual consensus, if your idea of infinity includes finite aspects, there is a flaw in that logic. Whatever can be measured in finite terms is finite throughout. Only zero, as shown on the number line, can mathematically represent an immeasurable and truly infinite origin. It is the starting point for all measurement and the reference point for defining all values in math. Since it has no finite attributes, it has no beginning or end. Our inability to produce finite evidence for zero is the sole reason for believing it is just a mental construct. It is the exact same reason people deny there is an infinite origin for all that is finite. Everything universally believed about God matches the reality zero represents in math, except the aspects that invoke imagination or personification. The God analogy not only gives us an example of something we understand yet cannot perceive or imagine, but it also removes the contradictions associated with defining the Creator in ways that can only fit creation. We associate power with choice and action, so it is difficult to think of dominion or supremacy without them. A deity we can relate to makes us more comfortable. Unfortunately, that comfort leads to contradiction. Our morals and virtues cannot be separated from our flaws and limitations. So, what may be meant as a compliment is actually an insult. People who prefer a more personal approach to God may struggle with this comparison. They'll say, well, if God doesn't care or act, why worship Him? This question reduces the absolute creator of the entire universe into a wish granting genie or Santa Claus for adults who give heaven to the nice and hell to the naughty. The absence of perception, imagination, or personification may make it seem like God cannot be understood or described. Zero's role as the reference point for defining all value in math provides more insight than what would be assumed. Zero represents the absolute, the infinite, the perfect, the eternal, and omnipresent. And according to the law of identity, the origin must be omniscient and omnipotent without intellect or action. We only know what zero is according to what it isn't and its relevance to everything else. Some people see it as having no value in an attempt to dismiss and demean. I see it as invaluable, which is reason to exalt and praise. God is to reality what zero is to math. Zero is the foundational reference for math, and math describes reality. The foundation of reality must be singular, supreme, and worthy of the highest esteem, what we call God. Even if you struggle to separate God from the myths and personified attributes assigned throughout history, the analogy shows that these fictional ideas are based on something real, just as Santa Claus is based on the man, St. Nicholas of Myra. The analogy doesn't try to define God into existence. It points out the truth behind the fictional depictions of God. The idea of a creator of the universe automatically invokes images of a larger than life being, even when we know about zero. It would be even harder to escape such imagery without zero, as was the case for the people alive when the Bible and Quran were written. We all learned and accepted zero's role in math, whether to fully accept it or simply to pass. So no new information about its properties is needed from me. Explore what zero as used on a number line means to math academically, and you will gain a deeper understanding of God and the meaning of life. The truth does not depend on belief or preference. It is what it is, whether accepted or comprehended. Just because we cannot know everything doesn't mean we should doubt what we can understand. Now, if this resonates with you, check out more content at zerothemathgod.com. There, you'll find more about intellectual righteousness, the philosophy built on the analogy God is to reality, with zeros to math. You will also find Theology for the New Millennium, the book introducing intellectual righteousness, and Musical Revelation, a rap EP about the philosophy. Both are available to be previewed in their entirety for free. But before you go, don't forget to like, share, and follow. Until next time, may peace be with you.